Have you ever thought about a figure you know really well, maybe a legend or even like a god, and then imagine their whole story flipped, seen through a totally different, maybe more human perspective? What if getting to be divine wasn't automatic? What if it was a journey, maybe even a messy one? Well, today we're going to get right into that kind of story. We're looking at The Immortals of Meluha. It's by the Indian author Amish Tripathi, and it's the first book in his really popular Shiva Trilogy.
Yeah, and it's important to say this isn't quite like your standard fantasy read. It really does challenge how you might see things. The core idea
Yeah.
takes Lord Shiva, a huge figure in Indian mythology, and says, okay, what if he wasn't born a god? What if he was just a man, a mortal guy whose life, his actions, his struggles, that's what eventually leads him to godhood. And it's all set back in 1900 BC in this place called Meluha, which seems almost perfect. Almost.
That setup alone is pretty powerful, isn't it? Immortal Shiva. So our mission here for this deep dive is really to unpack that. How does this book manage to blend, ancient myths with ideas that feel very relevant now? We'll explore things like destiny versus free will, that classic tension, and this idea of a perfect society that, well, maybe isn't so perfect when you look closer. Plus some really deep philosophical questions about what good actually means.
Right. And I think for you, listening, if you're interested in learning, this book is a fantastic way in. It makes Indian mythology feel really fresh and accessible. You get these aha moments, about struggles we all face, ethical questions, things that are just universal, really, often by turning the old stories kind of inside out.
Definitely. And we're going to touch on some really fascinating bits along the way, like how a simple drink can completely change someone's path, the kind of problems these rulers, the Suryavanshis, are dealing with, and then, boom, the arrival of Shiva. He's this tribal leader from Tibet, and suddenly he might be this prophesied figure, the Nilkanth. So, okay, let's picture Meluha, 1900 BC. Founded, the story goes, by Lord Ram. Looks great on the outside, right? A near-perfect place, but as you hinted, things aren't quite right. The rulers, the Suryavanshis, they're facing, well, problems. Rot from within, maybe, and threats from outside.
Exactly. There's this tension with the Chandravanshis and their ally, the Nagas, who are painted as quite mysterious, even sinister.
So it's already a bit unstable, and that's when Shiva arrives with his tribe. What brings them there? What's the immediate effect, even before they think he's the chosen one?
Well, they're basically refugees. Shiva and his tribe, they come down from Mount Kailash looking for a safer, better life in Meluha. Their arrival's a big deal. And then pretty quickly, he drinks this stuff called somras. It's this revered, maybe sacred liquid in Meluha. And when Shiva drinks it, his throat turns blue.
Ah, the Nilkanth clue.
Precisely. Nilkanth means blue-throated one. Suddenly, this physical sign marks him out. He fits the prophecy, the guy who's supposed to save Meluha from evil.
Right. So the Meluhans, the Suryavanshis, they see this and think he's the one.
Yeah.
But you said he's presented as very human. So how does he react? How does he deal with suddenly being labeled a savior, this huge destiny dropped on him? And what makes him start questioning Meluha? If they think they're the good guys, what makes him doubt that?
Yeah, that's really central to the whole book. Shiva doesn't just, shrug and accept it. He pushes back hard. He really grapples with this savior idea because, well, he looks around Meluha and sees things aren't as black and white as they claim. He questions their definition of good. It seems very rigid, maybe even unfair sometimes. He's like, is this really right? And that fight within himself, that search for his own moral compass while everyone else is telling him who he should be, that's what makes him so real, so relatable.
And there's someone else important in this journey, isn't there? Sati. Tell us about her. How does she fit into Shiva's story and these themes of, like, figuring himself out?
Sati, yes. She's a Melufan princess, incredibly capable, but she's also an outcast. There's this shadow over her past, linked to their laws and beliefs about previous lives, and it means she's shunned by many. Her strength, her independence, but also her vulnerability. It really connects with Shiva. Their relationship develops, and it's not just a romance subplot. It's built on, respect, understanding each other's pain. It really digs into prejudice, what makes someone worthy, how love can challenge societal norms. And it's absolutely key to Shiva finding his own way.
Okay, let's zoom in on some of those big themes. You mentioned myth versus reality, this whole reimagining. How exactly does the book show Shiva's divinity as something he earns rather than something he's just born with?
It's quite clever, actually. It kind of flips the script on destiny. Shiva isn't just following predetermined steps. His human reactions, his doubts, his mistakes, his choices, even the messy ones, those are the things that actually shape his path towards becoming divine. It suggests divinity isn't just granted. It's maybe a result, a consequence of facing genuine human struggles and making tough moral calls.
So it's less about innate power and more about consistent action, consistent moral effort.
Exactly. It makes you think about what heroism really means. Is it about being perfect from the start or about the struggle itself?
Which leads us right into destiny versus free will. That push and pull is obviously huge for Shiva. Does the book kind of land on one side, or is it more about showing that ongoing battle?
Oh, it definitely emphasizes the battle.
Mhm.
And I think the really smart part is how Shiva's skepticism, his insistence on choosing his own way,
Yeah.
that becomes the very thing that fulfills the prophecy. In a way, he's not just a puppet of fate. He's actively wrestling with it, trying to understand good and evil for himself. So it's almost like his free will is his destiny. It's a really interesting take.
And Meluha itself, this supposed utopia, you said the book peels back the layers. What are some of the first signs we get that things aren't quite as perfect as they seem? How does it show us the cracks?
Well, one subtle thing is the samras itself, the drink that identified Shiva. It's key to their long life, their health, their whole society basically runs on it. But
Yeah.
there's a hint of dependency, maybe even addiction.
Yeah.
Like it's masking something deeper.
Uh,
And then there's their social structure, very rigid, caste system, rules for everything. They have this very us versus them mentality, this perfect worldview, which means they're pretty intolerant of anything different. Like the Nagas, they just label them as evil without really trying to understand them. The book cleverly uses Shiva, the outsider, to notice these things,
Yeah.
to ask the awkward questions the Meluhans themselves don't ask.
That's a great point, the outsider's view. And this ties into the whole philosophy and dharma aspect. What is good? Is truth relative? What's the burden of leadership? The book uses other characters to explore this too, right? Like Nandi, Shiva's follower, or Daksha, the emperor, Parvateshwar, the army chief, Ayurvadi, the doctor. How do they add to this?
Absolutely. They each bring a different facet. Nandi is all about loyalty, duty, sort of embodying the ideal Meluhan follower, perhaps uncritically at times. Daksha shows the weight of leadership, the tough choices you make to keep order, even if they feel morally gray. Parvateshwar is the soldier grappling with fighting for a cause when maybe the enemy isn't purely evil and your own side isn't purely good. And Ayurvadi represents science, compassion, questioning things, often pushing back against superstition. Yeah, each character kind of holds up a different mirror to Meluha's values, helping Shiva and us, the readers, figure out what dharma or duty or righteousness really means in this complex world.
Okay, let's talk about the writing itself. Amish uses pretty simple modern English, which seems intentional, right? To make this ancient world feel immediate and accessible. Some critics might say it's not, high literature, but does that accessibility kind of become its strength?
Oh, I definitely think so. Yes, the language is contemporary, the dialogues can feel quite casual, but that's precisely what pulls you in, especially if you're not, say, deeply familiar with traditional Puranic texts. It makes these legendary figures feel like people you could actually understand, having conversations that don't feel overly stilted or ancient. And Shiva himself, he comes across as so charismatic, yeah, but also flawed, human. You really feel his struggle. It makes him a very strong anchor for the story.
So, wrapping up the book itself, beyond the fresh take on mythology, the philosophy, the fast-paced, strong characters like Sati, what are the big plus points? And maybe are there any common criticisms?
Strengths. The world building is definitely up there. Meluha feels very real, very detailed. Weaknesses. For some, maybe the very directness of the language can occasionally feel a bit blunt, or sometimes things might be explained a little too much.
Right, showing versus telling.
Exactly. And maybe some plot twists might feel a little familiar if you read a lot of fantasy,
Yeah.
but honestly, those feel like minor points compared to what the book achieves. We gave it a 4.3 out of 5, which is really solid, showing it connects with a lot of readers.
Yeah, this whole deep dive really makes it clear how the Immortals of Meluha offer something pretty unique. It takes this huge foundational myth and makes it feel modern, relevant, and surprisingly easy to engage with, even with the complex ideas.
So just to pull the key thoughts together for you,
Yeah.
the book really succeeds in showing us a human Shiva. His struggles, his emotions, they make him incredibly relatable. It grounds the whole divine concept in something very human. And then there's Meluha, that exploration of a society that looks perfect but has these hidden flaws, these external pressures. It genuinely makes you think harder about what an ideal society really entails. Is it even possible or desirable?
We've touched on how it juggles myth versus reality, destiny versus free will, and these deep questions of philosophy and dharma. It really pushes you to think critically about society, about individual choice. And it does all this with that accessible, often casual style. Hence the 4.35 rating, it clearly resonates. Definitely one to check out if you like mythology, adventure, or just thought-provoking fiction with that distinctly Indian flavor.
Which brings us to a final idea for you to mull over. If this book is right, if divinity isn't just given at birth, but something earned through your actions, through your karma,
Hmm.
what does that say about us, about our own potential to make an impact, to leave a legacy? How does seeing a God reimagined this way, as someone who struggles, who doubts, how does that maybe change your own ideas about what a savior is, or even challenge how you define good and evil in the complexities of the world around you?